well, tonight we have the pleasure of one of the co-organizers of the meetup, Joe Warren, who's going to give a talk about CSS. CSS is not a language. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. That's not his talk.
I was like, what? Wait.
Obviously, that's not true. Anyway, let's give it up for Joe Warren, who's going to give us some information about testing in React and his journey with it. When I hear about it, you're in for a treat. Go for it.
Oh yeah, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So let me find Zoom and then share my screen. All right. Now that I just threw off my windows, look, I still want to see some of you. Let me fix this real quick. All right. That'll do. That's fine. All right. So yes, thank you everybody for coming out. This is Laugh at My Pain, Volume 1, Testing in React. And this will hopefully be insightful, but also just a fun opportunity for us to talk about testing, front-end testing, testing in JavaScript, testing in React, what I've learned along the way, and maybe some things you can try, some things you may not want to try. But just a little bit of background about me. I'm a career switch, career changer. I went to a lot of meetups. You know, this meetup was a big part of my transition into this career. And I ended up going to a boot camp. And after that boot camp, I interned at Text-A-Mall. It was called Mall when I was there. And then ended up landing the position at USA. So that's just kind of my journey. And Mike, this is kind of, this is like a throwback experience for me because my wife, Crystal, is actually sitting right here. She has a chair just like old times. So she's always supporting me, which I appreciate. So thank you for that. All right, so let's get this going. So, also, I need to get this chat up because I want y'all interacting with me. I can't see the chat. Let me get that up. There we go. So yeah, if you can drop in just kind of if you have any experience with testing, if you haven't done any testing, if you're curious about it, if it's annoying to you, just kind of the process you've used, anything that you want to share, it kind of will help me too with where I want to focus. But yeah, we're all in this together, so feel free to utilize the chat. So, and are you seeing my slides? Unit testing, but why?
I see them. Do everybody else see them?
All right, cool.
See them loud and clear.
Yes, we can see them. You look better in the picture than you do in the flesh.
Oh, that's actually not me, but yeah, that's simpler. So unit testing. But why? Why do we want to go through this? So unit testing makes it possible to verify every piece of your code or every unit, it functions as it's supposed to. In other words, ain't nobody got time to sit around trying to use your broken app. And we're gonna get into this journey of how I learned the importance of this. So actually, before I show this, has anybody played Cyberpunk 2077? So this is a game that a lot of people were really looking forward to. And I was looking forward to it as well. As a matter of fact, I was in a fantasy video game league where we were trying to basically draft the games based off of when you think they would come out and how well you think they would score. So I chose this game 2 years ago. Needless to say, I did very poorly because they kept delaying that game. So yeah, somebody put Cyberpunk desperately needed to do unit testing. So that's exactly where I'm going with this. You got a game and you run into something. This is not what I would expect to happen. And there are videos all over the internet of all kinds of crazy bugs that this game has. I'm glad I didn't buy it. Eventually, one day I may play it, but this is an example of how costly it could be if you're not testing your code. Clearly, they didn't have enough testing. And I don't know what all goes into making a game of this magnitude, but they still didn't have enough unit tests. So we're running into this. And then it's not only in the digital world, this is also in the physical world too. And we're going to get into unit testing versus integration testing. So with the unit test, you're only testing one thing, one component at a time. But with integration testing, you're testing multiple things together. So in the real world, that may look something like this. You have a trash can that works perfectly. You have a hand dryer that works perfectly, but then you put them together and this is a mess. This is bad. So this is kind of one of those deals where you may not think about how things go together. So if you're not doing full testing, you're going to get this kind of experience. And then we'll get into end-to-end testing a little bit as well. And that will pretty much be this man walking into the bathroom, you testing every single thing that he does, and then him walking out. That's testing the full experience. So stuff like that is funny, but then, you know, like I said, it could be very costly. So thinking about self-driving cars, this is a website called moralmachine.net. And I definitely recommend going to it because they have these scenarios of what do you think a self-driving car should do if like the brakes fail. On one side, you have 2 women and 1 man, to where if you just have the car continue to go forward, it's going to hit them and kill them. Where on the other side, you have 2 female athletes and 1 male athlete. So you go through each of these just kind of voting on what you think, what you think should happen. So like the next example, this one has one woman, 3 homeless people, and 1 man, versus the other side, which would be 2 female executives, 2 women, and a man that would die. So when just kind of looking at this, the reason I bring this up is because when I think about a self-driving car, without thinking about tests and scenarios, I would just build a car. It goes forward, it goes backwards, it turns, it works well on my course, everything is fine. But without going through all of these scenarios ahead of time, this could be something that you don't even consider. And I to this day, I don't know how they're going to go about this because some of these scenarios have kids, so now do we need to know ahead of time, are we going to be profiling people and having their biographies ahead of time when we're programming the car and writing all these tests? So this is getting a little bit away from what we actually do with the web, but this just kind of shows how important it is, the decisions you make. Like I work with moving people's money every day. So I would be terrified releasing code bases and apps as big as we do without having tests of somebody trying to send $10, and for some reason my JavaScript going crazy and it's sending $10,000. That would be horrible. So this is very important. So this is kind of how spending more time with tests has me looking around the real world. So quick story, it's story time. So my wife and I, we're different. She's a planner. She likes to know details and everything ahead of time. She's going to take notes. She's going to research no matter what it is. She's going to know every single option that exists. And she may even find a good option, and she still wants to know if there's a better option. Whereas me, I'm more the side of, let's go. Like I see something I like, let's go. If we're about to go swimming, I bust through the door, I'm running cannonball, I'm jumping right in. I don't have time for all of that. And that's come back to bite me in this field. There was an app that I was working on. Actually, before I get to that, another example is I bought this whiteboard. So we've been at home, I'm thinking, I don't know when we're going back. I really want to set up my office so it's more like work. So I got the sit stand desk, so that's why I'm moving around. I bought a whiteboard, and the whiteboard says you basically have to drill it into the wall. I'm like, I really don't want to do that. I have some double-sided tape that I've used on all kinds of other things. This should work. So I'm just eyeballing it. Like, let me put a piece here, put a piece here, boom, boom. It should stick. I put it on. It's staying up there. I'm writing all my notes. This is like a good week. Everything is just going perfectly. Like, yeah, of course it's going to work. So we're sitting on the couch, relaxing with our 2-year-old daughter, and we hear a crash. And of course, they're like, what's that? I'm like, I don't know. So I go and check the bathroom. I don't see anything. I'm like, I know y'all don't think I'm about to go outside. It's nighttime. Y'all ain't sending me outside. So I just stayed on, went back to the couch, enjoying ourselves. So anyway, long story short, the next day I came in and the whiteboard is face down on the floor. I clearly didn't test how much tape or how much weight each piece could hold. And like, that's funny to me. I laugh about that, but it wouldn't have been funny if our 2-year-old daughter was sitting on the floor when I fell. So that's another situation where just not thinking about all of these scenarios ahead of time could come back to hurt you or somebody else. So how do we get to this situation or scenario where we don't feel as comfortable with testing? And from what I've seen and what I've experienced, a lot of common front-end course progression, they'll hit you with HTML first, which makes sense. and then CSS and JavaScript. And then if it's focused on React, you're gonna learn a lot about React. And then you got a bunch of other stuff, and like routing, Redux, that may fall under React. You learn about some APIs. You may learn something about backend, maybe, but all of that's kind of there. And then a lot of times at the end, that little bitty section is testing. And it makes sense to me why you would not want to throw testing concepts right at the beginning, because if you're just seeing HTML for the first time and know nothing about coding, like that's a lot that you're going to be taking in. And then CSS and JavaScript, like that's plenty. So for me, one of the things I'm hoping that is that there's a way that we can somehow bring this closer to the beginning of the process without making it too confusing, because too many times it's an afterthought and now you're learning on the fly. And then you may be feeling like me, like, what's the point of this? Why am I doing all this writing tests? I just want to write the code and get it out. It works. Take it. So here's another thing. Where do we even start? So the gift and the curse with front-end development oftentimes is that you have a lot of options. So you don't really know where to start. You got Jest, Enzyme, testing library, all of these different things, and they all bring a ton of value. But if you're trying to do this by yourself, it may be confusing. So one of the things that I try to do is rely on the documentation, like what the React docs say. And if you're going onto a team, they're probably going to have something set up already that you can use. So you'll probably learn with your team. But if you're doing this on your own, yeah, you have to do research and try to choose what's best for you. So let's look at this. So this is from the 2020? Yeah, this is the State of JavaScript Survey 2020. And this is all the test suites. So you can see the satisfaction testing libraries at the top. And React testing library, this is what you use to test your React components. And then right beneath it, we have Jest, which is a test runner. And we're going to go into all of that and what that means. But you're able to do unit testing and run all of your tests through Jest. So that's probably where we're going to spend most of our time. And then I just find this interesting because Enzyme was killing the game when I got into it. And it wasn't even on the survey for this year. That was interesting to me. So they've been dropping every year, and a lot of people have been going towards React testing library. So I'm not going to talk about Enzyme. You can look that up on your own if you want.
Why did it die, Joe?
Why did it die? Yeah. Well, Kent C. Dodds is like the go-to guy for testing in JavaScript. And he basically wanted to come up with a better approach of, so if you see in the chat, they're saying you want to test your code the way that your users actually are using your code, not looking at implementation details. And we're going to get more into that later, but from what I've experienced so far, it makes more sense with the way that you actually interact with your code. Okay. So, good question. All right, so before we get into actually testing, I want to talk about formatting. So these are two things that are gonna help you a lot. They're gonna save you a lot of time in terms of your formatting your code and catching just little errors that you may not catch yourself. So you can see prettier, this is the one on the bottom. This is an opinionated code formatter. You can set it up to save your formats to format your code when you save. So basically with this, it's going to take care of your indents. It's going to take care of like if you want single quotes versus double quotes, it's going to set all of that in place. And I've really enjoyed this because it helps me save time. And then when you're on the team as well, you all will have the same code. You're not going to be pushing in code that has different kinds of rules or style rules. And I've been in these rooms where we were going back and forth about just things that didn't really matter, but everybody was passionate about their way. Like, for example, if we're importing, say if you're using Redux or something and you're importing your types, should you import all the types on the same line or should each one be on the next line? And we were going back and forth about this to where it's like, if you have something like Prettier, it removes all of those conversations. You don't have to just go back and forth about like, is this way or that way or whatever. Code reviews, I've seen code reviews where they're saying, can you just delete one line or whatever? Takes all of that out the equation.
Then you get in the arguments about how long your line length should be, though.
So arguing is going to take place. That's pretty much what I've learned. So it's about how can we come to some kind of agreement of what's best for everybody? Because yeah, these are things that, you know, people are just passionate about. You know, I want it to look this way. And then ESLint, you can't argue with the linter. Nope, let the linter do everything that you need it to do. So this is going to catch things like if you create a variable and you don't use it, you know, it's going to throw an error to let you know. So you just don't have all of this unneeded code in here. Or if somebody drawing on the screen, how do you do that? Oh, okay. If y'all want to draw on the screen, that's cool. You know, we're all in this together. So, and then if you're doing something like console.log, you don't want to push a bunch of console logs, so I'll throw an error. And let me see, I was just going to quickly show in VS Code, if you go to, so I'll have the settings open, here, preferences settings. If you go down here, you can configure and change kind of how you want this stuff to work out. So let's see, where's one? So like if you wanted to format when you're typing or when you're saving, you know, it just has a lot. So you could go through that, get that configured the way that you want. Make sure I don't miss anything. Oh, and then there, I'm going to put a link to anything that I mentioned in the Slack channel. So there's something else called formatting toggle. And this is pretty cool because with the click of a button, you could turn on and off your prettier. So that's a VS Code extension called formatting toggle. Let me see, we have some questions. Universally accepted linting style guide for JavaScript. I'll throw that to the crowd. Like I've seen Airbnb, are they the one that had the linting guide? Yeah, Airbnb has a really popular one. But yeah, I'll throw that to the crowd. All right, and then the last thing before we get into our unit test, so type checking. So you have different options. And the first one is prop types. So if you're using prop types, it's basically, if you're passing a prop to a component, you want to tell your code what that type should be. So if we're working on the calculator and I'm expecting a number and a string comes in, say the user somehow puts a string or an emoji in there, it's going to say, hey, this prop, this number or this result is supposed to be a number, but it's actually a string. So prop types, really helpful with that. Flow and TypeScript, I'm not going to talk about because I haven't used them, even though I've seen TypeScript and I know people love it. So if you use TypeScript or Flow out there, this is an open invitation to speak to us sometime this year to enlighten us. So we can see that in real time. And this is just kind of what prop types looks like. So one of the things that I've learned when debugging is that when you first see an error, all of this red can be intimidating. Like, what is happening? But you know, if you just take a deep breath and read it. So what this is telling me, so we have display.prop types. Display is my component, and result is what I'm expecting there to be a number. If this is a calculator, I think this is going to be a number. Or I have it in here as a string, which is wrong. So this warning says failed prop type, invalid prop result of type number supplied to display, expected string. So this is telling me we wanted one thing, we got another, please fix it. So just want to take a quick break, see if anybody has any questions or wants to contribute to the conversation. Any thoughts on what we've talked about up until this point? Just give a minute, want to take a drink. Yeah, go ahead, draw all over that. How are you guys drawing on here? I want to draw too. Oh, annotate, is that it? All right, I got you, Justin. I'll see you, Joey. There we go, okay.
Hey, Joe, one of the things that I've seen in ESLint, and this is frustrating if you're maybe getting started is that if you jump into a package, or maybe you're working on a team and ESLint is turned on to where like you added one extra comma, or you didn't put an optional semicolon because JavaScript, and the whole app doesn't compile, right?
Oh yeah.
And then people are like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And they have to go through the whole stack, and they're trying to figure out like, oh, you left a semicolon off on the end of one function somewhere or whatever. So some of the stuff is like, maybe turn things down to, I think some of my coworkers do this, like turn off some of the ESLint rules or make them warnings, so that you can actually work through things and make them compile and not produce errors that just stop you in your tracks.
Yeah, that's a big one. Like you said, the semicolons, also putting a trailing comma at the end of an object, like that's annoying to me. So yeah, I definitely would suggest going through and turning some stuff off if it's annoying or stopping the flow that you don't need.
I've also used recently in all my projects the Husky package, which
Yeah.
will allow you to do like pre and post commit hooks. So you can, before you make a commit, you can run something which you run lint stage, and it'll look at all your stage files and then see, hey, you said these are the great ESLint rules you want. I'm hoping no lewd pictures come out of this, or I have to shut it down. That these are all the rules that you and your team said you would enforce, but your commit has a wrong thing in here, right? Like that is really helpful, because then you don't have to send something to CI and it builds for 15 minutes and then it fails and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
That's helpful.
If you're going to run ESLint and Prettier in the same package, make sure the rules line up, especially if you have autocorrect set for both ESLint and Prettier. Conflicting rules will sit and blow your project up.
Yep, that's a great point. And let me see if I can find it. So I have, this is format enable. So I turned off format enable for ESLint because Prettier is taking care of it. So yeah, you want to make sure you don't have those two competing with each other. All right, cool. All right, let's keep moving. Oh, is this going to stay on the screen? All right, y'all got to erase that now. All right, so we're going to get into some interesting territory. I know that there are some strong opinions about this. We have some people on the call. I would love to hear your input, but test-driven development and this process of writing your test before you write your code. Now, like I was saying earlier, I'm the type that in life in general, I'm ready to jump in, and sometimes I do that with code. So when I first heard this concept, it sounded crazy to me. Like why do you want me to sit here writing code or writing tests before I'm even writing the code? I'm trying to get something up on the screen. So this whole test-driven development culture, reminds me of CrossFit culture. Like if you know somebody that does CrossFit, because they tell you over and over and over. And I don't get the whole thing with CrossFit anyway, because you go to this hot gym and they barely have any equipment and they want you to pay like $120 a month. And then you go in there and they try to kill you for like 15 to 20 minutes trying to see who could exercise the best. It's a competition of exercising the best. I digress. And I'm just joking because I did CrossFit. I really enjoyed it. But anyway, test-driven development kind of reminds me of that. People are very passionate about it. So you want to write code to make your test pass, and you're going to refactor your code and test as you go along. Y'all crazy. Yeah, physical therapist loves CrossFit. For real, it's fun, but you got to be careful. It's dangerous. So I've actually changed my mind on this, and this came not out of something I tried to do, because when I've read about it or when people talked about it, it still just seemed like just a lot of time and unnecessary. But in the project I was working on, it was a brand new feature, and it was complicated, and there was some acceptance criteria that was missing, that as I was working through the code, I realized like, hey, if we do it this way, this is not going to work over here. Or once we go to the next page, that data is not going to be there. So it was a lot. I mean, there were some late nights. My wife knows, up to 3, 4 in the morning. It was a very challenging project, but anyway, finally got to the end, got all of it finished. Everything was working. I'm happy. I go to push the code. Everything fails because I have no test. I'm like, are you serious? And then the problem was, this was the first project I worked on at my company that use React testing library. So now I'm having to write a bunch of tests and learn a new testing library on the spot. So after that, and I can't see who all is on the call, but Ben Meyer, when I was hitting you up about that, yeah, that was this project. I was trying to learn like how do I test this scenario, and Ben helped me out a lot. But after going through that experience, reaching out to a bunch of people, watching videos, reading articles, going through some courses, going through the documentation, I said never again. So anything that I've worked on from that point, I always have that in my mind. So I kind of work side by side, like, okay, this is what I know I want to do. Let me go ahead and write a test for this, so it's already in place. Adrian, okay, I didn't know if you were still here, but she's write a failing test, write code to make it pass, repeat steps 1 and 2. Along the way, refactor aggressively when you can't think of any more tests. You must be done. Yeah, I wanted to get your feedback on that. Cause yeah, that's what I was thinking with the red green. Before it just felt like, because at boot camp we did this near the end, and it just felt like an exercise of turn this red screen green. I'm like, this is boring. But anyway, makes sense now. That's some of the pain when I say laugh at my pain. That was painful. So looking at the satisfaction, we have testing library and Jest at the top. And those are the two we're going to talk about. So Jest, this is a testing framework with the focus on simplicity. This is built and maintained by Facebook. So this is going to be your test runner where you're able to see all of the unit tests that you've written, and you're able to see if they're passing, if they're failing, why they're not passing or failing. And I'm going to very quickly just do a basic example of what this will look like in case you haven't used this yet. Just kind of want to show how you set this up. So where's my local host? Oops, am I on 3,000? I think I'm on 3,000. Yeah, okay. So this is a calculator I started working on. And right now what we can do is add numbers. So there's going to be a lot of logic in here. So before I even get to all of that, I just want to make sure my test is in place for adding two numbers together. And this is in the Jest documentation. So let's go ahead and write what this would look like. Get this out the way. So I have this calculate. I know that I want to do some calculations. And let me go ahead and comment this out. But when you write in tests, the format is going to be, you use the term describe to talk about, you want to put the name of what you're actually going to be testing. So these are calculations. You're going to have this arrow function. And then in this block, you could write all of your different test cases. So it's going to start with it. And then we could say something like adds two numbers. And we're going to do another arrow function. And then the terminology is expect. And we could just say, for the sake of this example, 2 plus 2 to be 4. So this test should pass because 2 plus 2 is always going to be 4 as far as I know. So then in here, okay, let me show how I open this. So in your terminal, I'm using Create React App. So if your project is in Create React App, Prettier, Lint, Jest is all built in. I think React Testing Library is built in as well. But I'm going to do yarn test to run my test suite. Here's my calculation test, and it passes. Did I already? Okay. So now the more practical use cases, I want to create a function that's going to do this. So I'm going to have this getSum function. And let me just comment this out. So I'm going to build a function called getSum. So if I put this in here, getSum, and it's going to take in two numbers, two parameters. So I'm going to expect getSum with 2 plus 2 to be 4. And it's failing because this is not a function. So now I need to go ahead and write a function. So in here, let's export const getSum. It's going to take in 2 arguments, and we're going to return A plus B. And then that should work. That passed. So that's pretty much what the process looks like. You know, in your test, write your logic of what you expect to happen. And then you can go into it confidently once you write the actual function. And you could, there are all kinds of other matchers that you can put in here. Like you can expect something not to equal something. You can expect something to be truthy or falsy. And let's see, I have a list that you can see. So let's keep it moving. So these are just the examples, the example I just went through. So if you go to the Jest documentation, they have so many helpful matchers, and you can just think of all kinds of different scenarios for your functions. If you expect something to be greater than something else, something to throw an error, you know, all of that. And then another cool thing, if you haven't used this before, if you've been testing the Jest, is something called Just Runner. So let me open that. It opened on, this opened on the wrong screen. Oops. Let me copy this over. Okay. So basically Just Runner, this is a VS Code extension if you're using it. This allows you to, with the click of a button, isolate one test. You could run one test and debug one test. So that just saves time. So you can see it right here. If I click run, instead of going through all of these different tests, it's only going to run this one test. Really helpful if you have a lot in there. So you can do this without having this installed. So if you're in your terminal, if you click W, it's going to show you some different things you can do. Like you can show only your failed test. You can filter by the file name. So that's something that I would do. Click P to filter. And then calculations, yeah, it'll run by itself. But Just Runner just makes that process easier to run one test. Let me get back. Sorry for all the flipping between screens. All right, so React testing library. Once we're beyond these functions and we want to test the actual components, this is where we're going to go. And as we were talking earlier, the guiding principle is functionality over implementation details. So I really like the testing library docs. They give you plenty of reasons of why we're taking this approach. So if you go to the intro, you can learn about it. Guiding principles gives you more information about how you should approach this. And then let's see, there's also a good link in the docs that's going to explain, you know, as we get into how we're going to query our DOM to grab, you know, what element we're looking for. This gives you a priority. So this focuses on interacting with your code visually as well as from an accessible standpoint. So get by role, you'll see we'll be using. So let's keep going. So this is the calculator I was talking about. And one of the things that I want to point out is, if you haven't seen this, this is super helpful, but there is an extension called Testing Playground. So if you're trying to figure out how to basically locate an element, you can use Testing Playground, which let's show you the website. This is the web version. They give you examples and you can just paste your code right into here and it's going to give you the query like screen.getRole button. And this will make more sense. So let's try it on here. Oops. So if we go over to Testing Playground, what you can do is click this icon and then select something on the page. And it's going to show you, okay, screen.getRole. This is an H1, so it's going to be a heading, and the name is React Calculator. So you could do this for everything. And I think a better example, something with more on a page, is let's look through the ReactJS Dallas website, which, Mike, is this open source, by the way?
It is, and it's woefully out of date.
Yeah,
We don't even, like, it even says 2019 in the footer. Like we don't even have date.now down there, you know?
So we could drop that link and you know, come together to make this current. But anyway, if you're trying to, you know, grab some elements, again, you can open up Test and Playground, and it's just going to give you every query that you need. So you don't have to spend time trying to figure out yourself. And let's see, I'll show you an example in the code of what it looks like. So this is the calculator app. You know, you're going to bring in your app, you're going to render your app, and then you're going to expect the query that you get from Test and Playground. And you can say to be in the document if it's just text you're looking for. And this is a simple implementation of, you know, React Testing Library, just looking for and validating links and buttons and text. So then there's so much more to it, because you also have access to a library called user event. And again, I'm going to post this in the Slack channel so you can look at all of this. So this user event library, now this takes it to the next level. I'm testing when I click on something, you know, user event clicks on, if they click on the checkbox from right here, we expect the checkbox to be checked. You know, you have double click, you have if the user type. So again, testing everything that your user can do, clear, select options. This is for a drop down. What else? Hovering. It goes very deep. And this is only scratching the surface, because you can also test, I mean, API calls, you could do mocking. And this is an example, a full example from the documentation. So you can see if you're doing like GET requests and you're waiting for information to come back, this is a good place to look. As you can see async, and you're waiting for something to come back. You're clicking on load greeting. So yeah, going through the whole deal with React Testing Library. So I'll share that link as well. So yes, this will be in my post as well, resources for learning. So this is some stuff that I really leaned on when I was working on that project. I was up to 4 in the morning doing. So the Testing Library Discord has a lot of really helpful channels, and every time I post it in there, they get back like immediately. Also, the React Podcast Discord, we have a testing channel in there, and I've posted in there multiple times and have gotten help. And then the Reactive Flux Discord, they also have a testing channel. And then these recommended links, the React docs, the Create React App docs, which are really good because they walk through everything I've talked about and so much more. And then from Kent C. Dodd's Common Mistakes with React Testing Library, and then How to Know What to Test. Those are two really good articles I would recommend checking out. And then if you're beyond unit testing and you're looking for, you know, end-to-end testing, or if you've heard of Storybook, Storybook is really cool because it lets you develop UI components in isolation. And the example that I like to use is that we had a 5-page form at one point, and this is a really detailed form. So we would have to put in all of this data to get to that 5th page. So it would take forever doing that over and over and over. So with Storybook, we can just set that state and see that component by itself without having to manually go through all 4 of those pages to get to the 5th page. So Storybook is super helpful. And then Cypress is fully automated end-to-end testing. So you can write out the code that you want to basically emulate a member going through your whole site, and you can sit and watch it happen. So that's really cool too. And there are other options, but Cypress is one of the ones that I've used and really enjoyed. All right. So that's all I wanted to cover. No questions. I'm out. I'm just kidding. If you have questions, let's go through it.
Yeah, not getting out that easy. Was there some questions in the chat that flew by? I think
I have a question. How do you best suggest for selecting things? I know that you suggested Playground, but when you have stuff like CSS modules where you start to get hashes, things get a little dicey, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point. So at our job, we use a lot of shared components that we're pulling in, like our own internal design library. So I can't even use this at my job. So, but what I do, or one of the things that I do, if you do Command-Shift-C and just hover over it, so the first thing I'm looking for is under accessibility, is there a role? And if there is, then yeah, you could go ahead and use that role. And then what Ben showed me, I guess this is kind of the same thing, but if you come over here to accessibility, because again, we're wanting to find a role first, it will be here, so it will help us out. In terms of if selecting by IDs and classes, I think I want to throw that to the audience if anybody has thoughts on that. It's something I've seen in projects. I try to stay away from, but I've seen a few scenarios where, yeah, still just went ahead and selected from CSS. So yeah, I'll throw that one to the crowd if anybody has strong opinions on that.
I think what somebody said, I think maybe Patrick earlier, was saying that Enzyme kind of lost this battle because they didn't test the app the way a user would, right? So if you keep that kind of paradigm in your mind, like we're trying to judge against the way a user would use this, they're not going to look for a test ID, right? They're going to probably click a button or interact with a dialogue or some other role. So yeah, like I think like Joe's saying, I try to aim at roles first and then try to get to the least specific all the way down to the most specific if I have to. Like we do have test IDs where I work on some elements because it may be the only way we can figure out how to target it, but in my opinion, that's a little breakable possibly. It also makes the DOM heavier, you know. Other thoughts?
Can I ask a question? So just for my curiosity, is it easy to set up if we want to try a test about like state change, or like the component, to test if a component like pops up when you click a button? I just want to know, like, is it easier to write it in Jest or the tools you introduced in this workshop?
Yeah, so what I've been doing so far, and I'll throw this to the audience as well, is basically mocking out props or state. And it still gets iffy because I know the focus is not supposed to be on implementation, but there are some things that are only going to show up if the state is this versus that. For example, if the type is, say, an email, then on the next page, I wanted to say email address instead of phone number, something like that. So I have done this with React Testing Library, just create an object of my props and my state, and it could be set up that way, which, yeah.
A couple of questions. One is there something that's just like, what is this called with React Testing Library, this little library that you can use to select things, to find the selection terms? Is there something like that for Jest? Because I use that Jest a lot, and it seems like it would be pretty handy.
Let's see, let me go back to the docs, because not a tool like Testing Playground that I know of. Are you referring to like all of these methods? Or
yeah, just sort of like, like you said, you took it out of the GUI. It was almost like going into developer tools. You select something and it just comes up with the select statement. Something that seems like grab it.
Not one that I know of. I would
okay. Also, quickly, do you happen to, we sort of started this whole thing off talking about like test-driven development, and how people are kind of like, this is really counterintuitive. Has it become more and more intuitive now that you've spent like those nights, say up till 3 a.m. figuring out how to do this? Yeah, like you got to learn the library, but do you think like this now? Like, do you actually get your assignments and then code the tests up and then make them go green, or do you still build the feature? Because that seems like, from my perspective, you still sort of have to figure out what the feature looks like by kind of building it, then going back and testing it. So I'm just curious if it's gotten any easier for you.
Yeah, so at first the change was, this is not going to happen to me again. I'm just doing this because I'm protecting myself. And from going through that, it has changed the way that I think about it. And one thing that I've learned is that once I just get in there and start writing tests, even if the tests aren't complete, but I'm putting the ideas, I've noticed so much more at the beginning of a process by doing that. So every single time I'm not writing a test right before the code, but if I write the code, then I come over here to make sure I write the test. Because again, I don't want that waiting. But yeah, that has changed how I thought about it. And when I was listening to a podcast, it was a concept introduced that was soap opera testing. And I found that really interesting. And that's all about taking it to the next level. Not only are you writing these tests, but you have different characters. You have Hack the Hanker or Hank the Hacker. He's going to come into your app and he's trying something fraudulent, you know? So just thinking like that as well, and thinking of specific people going through it, that's also helped my test scenarios as I'm writing them and helped me catch more things I wouldn't have otherwise.
So not just the happy path.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we found a lot of edge cases, like, and there are some things I'm like, how did we miss that, or how? But it's an edge case, you know, it wasn't obvious. So the more that you can start writing these tests and thinking these things, thinking about them ahead of time, you know, it's just going to help so much.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to say about snapshot testing?
Ooh, I actually had a slide about it and I deleted it because I didn't want to talk about it, but I will. So yeah, when I got on these teams, or the first few projects that I worked on, it was like all snapshot testing. And it just became autopilot, updating the snapshots. So I always felt like there's value in snapshots because you can see, for example, we get specific content from business that has to be written this way. So if somebody changes that, I would want to know. But the problem is we all just update them automatically pretty much. And from everybody I talk to and articles I've read, that seems to be pretty much what everyone falls into. So I don't know that snapshot is an issue itself, or if it's so easy for that to become an afterthought. So we've moved away from snapshots. You know, we're checking things in the DOM with React Testing Library. So yeah, that's something I've moved away from. But anybody else, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on snapshot testing.
There's something about it in the chat, Joe.
Oh yeah, great for projects where the DOM isn't represented by functions like vanilla JS DOM manipulation.
Yeah, I've been using it for a particular project I'm working on at work where we're not using React. We're actually just using plain old vanilla JavaScript. And I've actually found that using snapshot testing has been really nice for that, just because I'm not really representing the DOM in an easy way to get to. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I know that I've got some DOM here. Let's just test to make sure that the DOM is reacting correctly whenever I call this function. So I've actually found it fairly useful in that respect.
Oh, well, there you go.
I was told that the good rule of thumb is that if you have a pure function that spits out HTML that's supposed to be consistent, that's when you would use it.
Gotcha. Yep. What else? Oh, let me go ahead while you guys are thinking, post all of those links in the Slack channel.
Thought I saw a question earlier. Adrian called somebody named Mike illustrious. That must not be me.
Wait, no, you called Joe that. He said at the
Oh.
very beginning in his intro, yeah. And then I thought that it was illustrious when he was going to peace out before the questions.
Oh yeah.
I'll try.
Jared likes yeah. I have friends that are physical therapists that love CrossFit. It's like paying for their kids' college. There's something else. I saw somebody ask a really good question. That hasn't been answered.
Inter-browser compatibility.
That might have been it.
What was the question?
When you've got to pass tests in Chrome and IE and stuff like that, how does that relate to unit testing?
So I hadn't run into an issue with that. I did with Cypress, and we're actually going to use Cypress, but they don't support IE for end-to-end testing. So we wound up using WebDriver. But I hadn't run into issues with that yet. Anybody else?
I can speak to that a little bit. It's going to depend if this is like a personal project or, you know, if you work somewhere. It depends on the browser governance that, you know, that company has, right? Because not all the places are supporting all the browsers. And beyond that, there could just be a different standard of testing in your area. So some places would say it is good enough that you do unit testing in Chrome and you're doing manual testing, you're spot checking your work other places. That is an opinion. And it's kind of hard to say if that's best or not. It sounds to me like there'd be a gap there, but there just could be a situation where you aren't fully covered. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. I guess testing really is a science, but it's very much an art. And you'll have to find the level of confidence that you want. But then again, if you're employed somewhere, you'll be held to that standard. Plus, there can be like your team's standard. So even among like a big company, teams have different ideas about what is good enough, what is MVP.
I think we need to get Adrian on the docket for a testing talk, it sounds like.
I've been trying. I'm trying.
I think that would be fun, yeah.
There's a lot to learn. I think where I work, we on the web application, the main web app, we have Cypress running some automated tests that are, you know, our company says these are the tests that it's really the customer experience and like the people that deal with the customers say these are the things we have to test. How much of this can be automated? Some of it can't be. And they have to manually test a few things each week because we're pretty small. We don't have like a whole QA team, but we do have a gap. We don't have like we support IE11, but we don't test on that. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't happen. We test on it when somebody says, "Hey, IE11 broke," and we're like, "Oh, we forgot about that one." But I work on the React Native ad now, so that's on those other guys. Mostly kidding.
Joe, would it be terrible scope creep to just like talk about the M word, the other type of testing? Can we bring up mutation testing for like 1 minute? Well,
okay, yeah.
Okay. So this could be its own dedicated talk. I just want to put it in your minds that the world of testing truly it's big. So there's a way to test the quality of your test, and that's called mutation testing. And if you're bored, you know, Wikipedia.
You need to type in M word equals mutation testing.
A thing in software development that can be really helpful to feel confident in your code. That's all, just a word, mutation testing.
Is this like chaos testing, like the same thing Netflix does?
Oh, no, I think that's kind of different. So I'm not as familiar with their chaos testing. I think that's more site reliability engineering, and they're trying to bring it down or see how resilient it is. It could be its own talk, but in a few sentences, mutation testing, it introduces mutants into your code, which are kind of like specific operators already written. So like a rule set. And an example would be, instead of 1 + 1, it would replace your plus sign with a minus sign. And all it's going to check is, did your unit test catch that? If you've done a really good job, you know, writing out your unit tests, maybe you used TDD, maybe you wrote them later, you should have 1 or more failing unit tests because you've changed your code. Like it's behaving different functionally. If all your tests are still passing, that's bad. That means, you know, you missed something. And the point of mutation testing is to find gaps in your unit testing. So you can have 100% unit test coverage, and you can still have really low mutation coverage, like 40% or something. If you have 100 and 100, you can feel like, wow, I'm infallible. Not quite, but yeah, that's the point of it. It's another tool.
Awesome. That's cool. Stephanie worked with a chaos tester by his own nature. When I went to the AWS conf a couple of years ago, and Netflix gave a talk and blew my mind. I cannot believe the stuff they were doing. This is in 2018, I think. And they were like on the edge of all their AWS infrastructure. They're throwing in purposely breaking things constantly to try to take down different Netflix servers to see what happens, see how quickly it comes back up. Like, you know, it's just pretty smart. Yeah. I think Netflix started it. Yeah. I don't know, more than 50% positive that's true. It's Chaos Monkey is the engine they use to run it. Yeah, I think that if nobody else has any other questions, then we'll wrap it up for Joe. Your last chance to ask him about all his testing knowledge. Cool. Yeah, Joe, thanks a lot, man. It's always a pleasure. I've known Joe a long time. Our combined love of Snarky Puppy brought us together at a coffee meetup one time. Yeah, so we have like I was talking about at the beginning of the event, we have a need for more speakers all the time, and it's not I mean, me or Joe will always get up here and talk or whatever about whatever we're dealing with or learning or experiencing, but it'd be great to hear from the rest of the community too. So if anybody knows some people that wanted to speak, hook us up and talk to us. This coming month, next month, we have Justin Noel on the docket. I think he's talking about some React stuff with Cloudflare. I need to research it a little bit more. It sounded pretty interesting. And then, like I said earlier, in April, we have Tim Waite, who's going to jump in from the Vue meetup and give us a little of React and Vue and kind of React versus Vue. And Jared's asking about recordings. We do have someone that's working on recordings for us right now. We're trying out a couple of things. So we have almost a year long of backlog of videos to go through. Anyway, we're working on some stuff. That costs money. So you could support us, any of us, by throwing a couple of dollars at the Open Collective, which is linked in all the meetups events on the meetup.com page too. That'd be good. Some of the stuff that we do is not free, although none of us get paid. When I get done, I'm going to go eat tacos. So we're about to wrap it up here in a second. Good to see all of y'all again, and we'll stay on the chat for a couple minutes, but I think we're done. See you soon. Thanks, y'all.